I will start then. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where y'all are. My name is Patricia Lebowski. I'm an employee of the National Institutes of Health. And as many of you know, the NIH has a very strong commitment to development of the future biomedical research workforce. It's something that's studied and modeled and analyzed routinely here at NIH and elsewhere. In 2012, a special working group of the advisory committee to the NIH director, they published a report that showed very clearly that a large proportion of biomedical research trainees, grad students, and postdocs, like many of you, were very interested in careers outside academic research, and industry was a large proportion of that workforce, but not all of it. So it's very broad, the interest level. At the same time, it also became obvious that many or most academic mentors, so your PI, might not, probably would not have the contacts or even maybe working knowledge to facilitate movement of their trainees into these different career paths. And that's okay. The NIH recognizes this, and one NIH effort directed toward helping trainees is to set up these BEST experiments, and BEST stands for Broadening Experiences in Scientific Training. It's an acronym that we use and misuse all the time, so we call them BEST. So to set up these experiments in which the universities who receive these awards, there's 17 of them, are testing ways to augment the training of their grad students and postdocs to include career development, professional development, and basically help prepare them for the diverse workforce that they're likely to encounter. So here today, the BEST Consortium is partnering with ASBMB for the second year in a row now on a series of webinars this summer, and this is the first of them that we're doing together. I'm really happy to welcome you all today. This one is called Building Your CV to Get Noticed. The moderators here, two of them are affiliated with two of our BEST sites, one at Cornell and one at Virginia Tech, that you'll meet them in a moment. So thank you all for joining us again, and I hope this information that you get here today, this hour, will be useful to you. The webinar is being recorded. It will be available on both the ASBMB and the NIH BEST websites. Also notice that when you sign off, you're going to get a short survey on the webinar. Please answer the questions for us. Last summer, we did the same thing, and we modified these webinars based on comments from you all, or the participants from last year. So we'll use that input to help design future webinars. So again, welcome, and I'm going to hand this off to Erica from ASBMB.
Thanks, Trish. My name is Erica Sabrassi. I'm the Education Manager for the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, which is a co-sponsor of today's webinar. So I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the ASBMB, in particular the Education and Professional Development Committee, who is the direct sponsor for today's webinar. So the ASBMB has also had a long-standing interest in career and professional development, especially for grad students and postdocs. And we've been really amping up our efforts over the past 2 years to provide useful and helpful resources to grad students and postdocs interested in a variety of career paths. So this webinar series is one of those, and you can find the rest of the career resources that the ASBMB offers on our website at www.asbmb.org. So a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to our presenters. The first is that none of the participants will be able to speak today. This is because there's over 90 of you on the phone or on the line right now watching the webinar, and that's just too many people to open it up for verbal questions. So we will have a very long question period at the end of today's webinar, and we ask that you submit your questions through the Q&A box that's located on your screen. So just send those questions in throughout the webinar, and we'll answer them on the end. For the people who are on the phone line, if you dialed in over the phone, I need you to mute your phone if you're not speaking. There's quite a bit of feedback on the phone right now from someone. So if you're not speaking, please make sure your line is muted. I think that's all of the housekeeping items we have on our end. So instead of using the hand raising option, please type in your question to that Q&A box, because I won't have any way to speak with you when your hand is raised. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Susie Varvayanis. She's a senior director at Cornell University, which is one of the best sites. And I'll turn it over to Susie, who can tell me if I pronounced her last name correctly.
Absolutely. Good job. It's shorter than my maiden name, so we're doing well. So I just wanted to kind of put this webinar in context in that we have a lot of other webinars that have been pre-recorded and archived at the ASBMB site. So our context today is to focus a quick overview on the stages of career exploration so that we know in which stage that this webinar falls, and we'll concentrate on what to do when and what it is you want to do to advance your career. It's very important to know what job you're applying for, so without that knowledge, it's very hard to construct your CV to get noticed. In addition, we're going to touch on what the employer is going to look for and the sections of your CV or resume that have the underlying messages and tips to help you stand out. We'll conclude with a perspective of a hiring manager and what they look for in applicants before we continue with questions. So the stages of career exploration are not unlike the food pyramid. Just as you know, you cannot just survive on fats and sweets. Your values, interests, and knowledge and skills are guiding principles on which your career decisions should be made. We hope that you will spend the most time in your career exploration to understand yourself. And there are various self-assessments that are very useful to conduct this stage. So beyond that, we hope that you will gather information and explore the who, what, and where through career panels, researching employers, and informational interviews so that you can better prepare for your career of the future. It's really important to acquire and practice the skills such that you will be finding a good fit in the career of your choice. You do this through networking, through improving and modifying your LinkedIn profile, and spending a lot of time reviewing these job descriptions. If you're interested in academia, this is a good time to be looking at a research statement, preparing a teaching statement, codifying your mentoring philosophy, and thinking about including a diversity statement for any position you're going to apply for. And finally, the application phase is really when you would revamp your resume from your CV, practice interviewing, and evaluating job offers should you be lucky enough to compare a few. This webinar is going to focus really on the resume CV portion to acquire and practice the skills. This focus, before you take action, will help you get much more out of each experience. It will also help you set priorities and streamline your actions. One point I want to make here is that this is an iterative cycle. Just as you don't give up on your fruits and veggies just because you're eating sweets, don't give up on exploring options, networking, and reevaluating your skills and interests as you go through the application process. Here's a link to the ASBMB webinars that have already covered careers in industry, charting a course to career success, and many others. So I'd like to continue by citing Melanie Cinch's Next Gen PhD, A Guide to Career Paths in Science. If you haven't already looked at it, it compares what employers look for. In the rightmost column is the frequency of and importance that employers place on certain transferable skills. This is compared with the first numeric column, which describes what the doctoral students value as the most important skills. The largest gaps are found in areas of time management, effective teams, working with people outside your organization, and managing others. The point is here that these qualities and skills should shine throughout the different sections of your CV to emphasize the transferability of the skill sets that you have. So what we want to focus on is getting your PhD transferable skills that you might not even know you need because you might underestimate what employers say they need. I refer here also to Sauerman and Roach's recent publication called Why Pursue the Postdoc Path that appeared in Science recently. When only 28% of respondents say that a postdoc was necessary for their job, we want to certainly discourage the use of a postdoc as a holding pattern until you decide what you want to do. So let's focus on the tips for creating the parts of your CV to let these qualities shine through. The most important thing is to start now. Even if you're in your first year of your PhD or you're 3 months from the end of your postdoc, don't rely on your PI. Don't rely on your advisor. Please network with others. Learn how to craft solid communications, things along the lines of reviews, recommendations, even rejections. It's not about formatting your CV. It's about highlighting your personal qualities, your knowledge-based skills, and transferable skills. So one common component of every CV for researchers is the research section. Now, instead of just listing your accomplishments, focus on why is it important? Why should anybody care about it? What is the impact of your research broadly, not just in your particular field of specialists? Concentrate on the now what. What are you going to do next? And what should others do as a result of what they just learned? There's a section of awards. Now, they don't just happen by accident. You can self-nominate for awards, ask people to nominate you, nominate your peers, nominate staff or faculty for awards. The portion of your CV that is for awards should also reflect a two-way process. Just as on LinkedIn you might receive recommendations, you should also give recommendations to others. An important aspect of awards are that they reflect that you can go after independent funding, whether it's through fellowship applications or other means. This is an indicator that you're going to be able to be an independent researcher. Professional organizations are also important to list on your CV or resume. Choose the right ones that are appropriate for the career path that you want to pursue. Your professional organizations that you belong to just because you want to submit a abstract to the next professional meeting is a good place to start, but I suggest that you should be engaged. Even if it's just to volunteer to give out name tags at the meeting, you might network with some very important people coming into that meeting and can start talking to them right away. You can suggest speakers for the next professional meeting. Be involved in the graduate or postdoctoral organizing group to bring in different aspects to the meeting, such as career development panels or career panels, workshops on developing skills. These are all important, and in addition, if you are interested in going into, let's say, licensing, why not become a member of the Licensing Executive Society? That will give you the short list of professionals who might be in the geographic location in which you'd like to reside. I'm going to hand off this portion of the webinar to Audra Van Wart from Vanderbilt, from Virginia Tech, who will continue to talk about the teaching aspects. Thank you.
All right,
And
thanks, Susan.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt really quick. I apologize, Audra. If everyone who's on the phone line, and this includes both presenters and any of our participants who needed to join the phone line because the audio was poor quality for them over the computer, we really need you to mute your phone line if you're not Audra and you're not speaking. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm just going to keep talking through that. So another section that might appear on your CV would be teaching. And this is an important part of your CV, even if you're not going to go on to pursue a position that does heavily involve teaching. Teaching demonstrates a number of different skills, such as your ability to communicate science and your ability to communicate beyond your immediate research scope. So in this case, it's not just about the quantity of courses and workshops that you teach, but also about the quality. You want to be able to emphasize the level of independence you had in either preparing the material or leading instruction of the material. If there's any other element that you worked hard on, that you had a real focus on pedagogy or instructional technology, you want to make sure that you're listing those things under this section. And also, if you have sent out evaluations and sent out and received feedback from your students, and you had very good evaluations, you'll want to highlight that, as well as any kind of teaching awards. And so this also goes back to what Susie was saying about awards. If you are teaching and there's a teaching award, you should not have any shame in asking people to nominate you for an award. And I'll need some help advancing the slide here. Oh wait, I got it. Okay, so another section you may have on your CV will be references. It's important that you are selecting the appropriate people to be your references. A lot of times students are debating whether or not they pick someone with the biggest name in the field or pick someone who knows them well. It is really important that whoever is serving as your reference is someone who's familiar with you and your research and other activities that you've been involved in and can speak very highly of you. So that is important first and foremost. So think about that when you're selecting your reference. You'll also want to prepare them, so they should be aware that you're listing them on their CV. They might have even provided a letter for you. Whether they've done that or not, you want to make sure that they've seen a copy of your CV so that they can refer to specific aspects of the things that you've participated in and the research that you've performed. And you'll also want to keep in touch with those references. So might have worked very hard to establish a relationship during one part of your career. You'll want to make sure that you continue to maintain that relationship, even if it's turning back to that person for advice or just letting them know what you've been up to, how you're doing, send them an updated version of your CV. It's really easy to lose touch with people, and it's a shame to let those good relationships deteriorate over time when they could serve as important references. And then lastly, keep in mind that everybody's a potential reference. So you don't want to burn bridges. That's going to affect your reputation in the field. Science is a smaller community than you may realize. So always do your best and keep in mind that everyone is a potential reference and also potentially a potential employer and someone who might be asked to comment on you during the time that they knew you. And then finally, there are a number of other experiences that are going to vary from CV to CV, and if you have any of these experiences, you should find a way to highlight them either in one of the existing sections or in just starting another section. So for example, if you are very strong in the use of social media and you have a lot of followers and you've really been able to either motivate individuals behind some kind of a theme, this is a good thing to highlight. If you've volunteered in various types of outreach activities, you'll want to highlight these. Any kind of projects that demonstrate teamwork, time management, multitasking, all of these categories that Susie had listed just a few slides ago that employers are looking for, you want to make sure that you're highlighting those. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you a couple of action verbs that you can use to demonstrate these skills. And like I said, leadership and management, if you are engaged in quite a number of different activities under leadership and management, then feel free to put that as a separate category on your CV. So we only have a short amount of time, and we really had to decide as a panel what kind of tips are we going to give to you. And one of the key tips we can give is to prioritize your time. So do the responsibilities you're taking on align with your career goals? Time is really limited, and it gets more and more limited as you get busy. When you're first starting out every opportunity is something that you want to grab at because you want to just build up your CV, and that's okay. But at some point, you'll have a number of different opportunities, or there might be low-hanging fruits that that you need to stop picking so that you can go for those higher fruits that are going to have more of a payoff. So I'm going to take, mentally go back to that pyramid that Susie described. There are all these processes during the career development. There are all these elements to the career development process that you need to consider. A lot of these come back to introspection and figuring out what your career goals are. So if you are in tune with what those goals are, it'll be easier to ask yourself whether to seize that opportunity or not. And when you are in the position where you're able to say, maybe this is not the opportunity I should spend my time on, you need to know how to say no and when to say yes. And I do feel a little bit silly trying to give advice on this because I think a lot of us are still trying to learn how to say no, but you do want to do this in a way that is going to not make you look like you're disinterested and not close the opportunity for future invitations to participate in those types of activities. But you do need to figure out a way to politely say no when you just simply don't have the time or can't prioritize that type of commitment at the moment. And then the other big piece of advice that we want to give is it's important to establish yourself as an expert. You want to build your brand, and doing this is going to help with all of those components of your CV. So as I said, science is a small community. You want to be known for your area of expertise. You want to be known for being an intelligent person, a leader, things like this. So how can you do this? Well, one way is to be quoted in news articles, either for small press releases at your institution or in more wider impact articles. Another thing you can do is ask good questions at meetings and at conferences. So in between my postdoc and joining Virginia Tech, I had actually served as an editor, a scientific editor at the journal Neuron. And this is a way that we identified future reviewers, future authors of review articles, is by attending conferences and listening to who were asking the best questions and the most insightful questions. So you may not realize you're making a strong impact by being vocal at meetings, but you really are, and I highly encourage you to attend and to participate. Ask your mentor to fill in for them in a speaking engagement. So I know this can be a challenge, but your mentor should at least be aware that you would be up for that opportunity if they're unable to attend a meeting, that you'd be willing to speak in their place. You can also assist in reviewing articles for journals, writing review articles and book chapters, and again, learning to use social media to help build your brand. And in your CV, you should be sure that you're using action verbs. So, so things like organize, promote, lead, manage, solve. If you were able to solve a major issue that was taking place in your lab, make sure you emphasize that. If you developed something or coordinated something or launched a series of workshops or led a conference, make sure that you're using the appropriate terminology to help convey the impact of those achievements. All right, so at this point, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Alan Kaufman at Procter & Gamble, and he's going to talk to you about the hiring manager's perspective on the role of the CV in the resume.
Yes, hello,
Alan?
Thank you. Okay, so yes, my name is Alan Kaufman, currently working at the Procter & Gamble company. I am a section head. I received my PhD at the University of Kansas about 8 years ago. I've been working at P&G ever since. And with the company, I do new product development and R&D, but as a side kind of job, I also recruit for the company, which means that I've seen a lot of resumes and CVs over the past 8-9 years that I've been working at P&G. Thousands. So I just want to give you a little bit of perspective from a hiring manager. I'm also a hiring manager, and I'm going to just give you the perspective of this from an industry perspective, because that's where I'm from. Okay, so just to get everybody really grounded, what is the purpose of your CV and resume? The purpose, the sole purpose of this document that you're creating and when you're looking for a job is to get you an interview. It is not to get the job. This provides hiring managers quick read of your skills and qualifications. Typically, there's a job posting or a requisition that you'll see online that you're applying for. And this is kind of does it fit? Do you fit with those types of, do you have those skills? Do you have the qualifications for the job? Another thing to consider, once you do get the interview, it is an interviewer's guide for that interview. This will be the one document that they use in the interview to highlight experiences, skills, communication skills as well. The CV resume is also an example. It is the only example that you'll have of your communication skills. Likelihood is that you will not talk directly to a hiring manager until the interview. So this is your one and only shot at proving that you have good communication skills. It does not take the place of a job application. Many times within companies or within academia, you will have to do some sort of online application or physical application. Just sending your resume or CV to somebody does not take the place of an application, a formal application. Okay, so this is the process in general from a hiring manager's perspective. Like I said, the application, this is where you'll use your resume CV. Then it will go to a screening where a hiring manager will pull, let's just say 100, 200, 300 candidates for one requisition and go through the CVs and resumes. This will then lead to usually a phone interview or an on-campus interview if a recruiter is on campus. And then ultimately what you really want to get to is utilizing all those communication skills to get the day visit, which is then kind of how you can then shine, with more oral scientific communication as well. Okay, so then taking all that in perspective, this is a buyer's market. In the industry, so for a job at P&G, let's just say, PhD level job, there is about 6,000 to 10,000 CVs or resumes that we see every year for a certain amount of just a handful of positions. This transcends all disciplines, and a lot of times folks will actually apply to disciplines that aren't relevant. So really try to be targeted, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The 30 to 45 factor. When I'm looking at CVs and resumes, I'm looking at a lot. Typically, like I said, I will pull 300-ish candidates for a position, and I'm only going to give them a matter of seconds, perhaps anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds to scan that CV or resume, and that's not a lot of time. I understand that, but if we spent hours looking at each one, I would never actually get to do the job that I'm paid to do. And then also the 45 minutes, that's usually how much time is allotted in an interview, and we'll get to why that's important. Just to point out, your wealth of experiences alone won't land you the job. You have to have a combination of those soft skills, those transferable skills that was talked about earlier, as well as your technical mastery. Okay, so for your CV, and the challenge then basically is hitting the job target. Do you have all the requirements of being a successful candidate? And how do you bring that to life in your CV and resume? The most important thing that you can do with your CV and resume is be honest in your assessment of, can you do this job? Do you want the job? Are you the best candidate? And remember the level of competition. There's hundreds, literally, maybe thousands of people applying to the same position. The reason I bring this up is because if you embellish too much in your resume or CV, it will get brought up in the interview. If you say that you are an expert in ion chromatography, then you must be an expert in ion chromatography and be able to talk very technically in depth about how you can apply that technique or technology to certain problems and understand the limitations. Your resume or CV has to capture the attention of reviewers, so it has to be on target. Also realize that the initial reviewer for that screening portion, that may or not be a technical person. They may or may not be the hiring manager. So really what they're looking for are some things I'm going to talk about here in a second. But really, it's, do you meet the skill set? Do you have good communication skills? And there are some things, like I said, I believe in the next slide, that I'll talk about some things that you can do to help that screening process go a little bit better. And here they are. Areas of scrutiny. For a PhD, publications. That's the first thing that we go to whenever we pick up a CV. We want to see if you're publishing. Typically, it's quality over quantity. We as scientists know, have a good understanding of what the good journals are in a specific field. And so if it's more about, are you publishing? Is the quality of the journal good? That's number one. Number two is, do you have the right technical field of expertise and the tools to contribute for the position? For example, we might not need a chemical engineer for a biotech role. It's, what types of experiences do you have that make you relevant for that position? Number three, quality of written communication. Is your format consistent? Is it clear? Is it, tabbed right? All these things, right? Is it not too busy? Is it very clean? Presentation is key. Again, going back to the communication aspect, this is the only time that you're going to have with a person to communicate with them, and your CV does that. Demonstrated outcomes. This is very difficult for some PhDs coming out of academia. What did you do? What you did, and what has it been effectively communicated? Were there outcomes? And also the demonstration of leadership. All right, so here's how you can increase your equity. For people always ask, how can I make my resume CV stronger? What types of experiences can I have to make it stronger? Here's some things that I would say are relevant. If you're an undergrad, summer research, if you are a PhD person, getting a doctorate, internships are always helpful. Targeted temporary employment. So I didn't do an internship, did a lot of research over the summer, but I did a short stint with a phase 1 facility in industry, and that helped me kind of get an understanding of is industry right for me, but it also looks really good on my CV. Serial innovator traits. So along with all the things that myself and other folks have talked about today with regards to transferable skills, leadership, communication, this and that, these are some things that you really need to think about. There's a book in 2012 called Serial Innovators by Abby Griffin, Ray Price, and Bruce Bojak. If you happen to go on Amazon, it's a really good read. It's a lot of what companies are looking for right now, and it's focused on these things, these traits that people have. Are you motivated? Are you self-motivated? Are you tenacious to see things and problems to an end state? Are you people-focused? How do you learn? Are you broad? Are you agile? And you must be technically strong. So these things most people don't think about, but they are traits that we are starting to assess against when we look at PhD candidates. You can also use these traits and you can bring them to life in a CV. Also really important, highlight your leadership, highlight your awards and accomplishments. Very important. And I believe with that, that's the end of my section.
Thank you, Alan and Audra and Susie. So we do have some questions from the audience, so I'm going to start with read them in the order that they came in. But for the 103 participants that are on with us right now, if you could continue to put in your questions through the Q&A box, we'll just keep going through those questions until 2 o'clock. So first question is from Austin, who asks, in regard to formatting, would you recommend putting the year of the membership, award, etc. first, and then the name of the membership, award, etc., or vice versa? So they're asking, should they put the name of the award?
I can take that one. It doesn't matter as long as it's consistent and clear.
Great. Lisa asks, what is the difference between a resume and a CV?
Well, I mean, the resume is going to be much shorter than the CV. The CV represents research, publications, and achievement from throughout your career, whereas a resume tends to be limited to 1 to 2 pages. And the resume is really going to emphasize deliverables, so it has to be very concise. Instead of listing out all of your publications, you may need to focus on just a few publications, or to say I've published 143, peer co-authored publications and peer-reviewed manuscripts, 2 book chapters, etc.
Thank you. Casey asks, how long should a CV be for an industry position?
For CV, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific length. I think to the point that was just made, CVs can be much longer, and really just don't make, if it is long, just make sure that it's long for a good reason, right? Don't put fluff. I mean, make sure that everything in there is relevant to the position that you desire, and then it also highlights, who you are and what you can bring to the table.
Thank you. Next question is from Susan, who asks, do you expect to see a skills section on the CV with different equipment and lab techniques listed or explained in more detail relating to projects that the candidate has completed?
This is Susie. I'll take that one. I would say you have to look at the job application. If they're asking for experience with a Waters HPLC, then you better put that on there.
The next question is directly for Alan. It's, what suggestions do you have for foreign students pursuing PhDs at U.S. universities applying for industry jobs?
Okay, so yeah, this comes up quite a bit. I would say the process is going to be the same for everyone. Typically, there's a box that checks, do you need sponsorship? Again, be honest about what your need and what your current situation is, because the last thing that you want to get to is an offer that something just can't be fulfilled by either the candidate or the company, and a bunch of time has been wasted in this and that. So I just say it is well. We do a lot of that. Most industry does do that. And I think, just go online and apply just like everyone else. Just be honest in your current situation and, it'll work out.
Thanks. And as a reminder for our participants, if you have a question, please don't raise your hand. Please type it into the Q&A box. The next question is for someone with a master's degree who's applying. What order should they follow in writing the CV? Should education go first? Anybody
I typically see education first. It doesn't really matter. It will be first or it will be second.
Okay.
But it tends to be listed first.
Thanks. Sarah asks, what happens in a situation where one has never had the opportunity to teach? And I assume Sarah means that the person would be applying for a job where teaching is part of the job responsibility.
I do think it puts you at a disadvantage if you haven't had the opportunity to teach, and teaching is an important component of the job. Especially, academic positions are very competitive. So, you could be in a situation where you're just an outstanding researcher and you're able to emphasize other aspects of your communication skills, such as being invited to give scientific presentations very frequently. There's other ways to demonstrate your presentation skills and your communication skills. But if you do have think about this, if you do have the opportunity to be involved with teaching, that is going to be an advantage for you.
The next question is, how can you position yourself to transition into a new field? If your experiences are focused on research and you want to move out of research, how do you frame yourself as the best person for a job you lack the typical skills for? I can take this one if you guys want. So my background, I have a PhD in microbiology. I moved into the ASBMB as a science policy fellow and now work in STEM education, so I think this fits pretty well. I did a fair amount of work to build my CV during grad school, so I sought out experiences, particularly in K-12 outreach, that allowed me to get leadership experience. So while I hadn't done any policy work per se, I could say that I could clearly show that I was experienced with communicating with the public, both with students and with their parents. So I had a good non-technical communication skills, and I could also show that I had been a leader and I had led other people through leadership with this outreach organization. So I think that There are plenty of experiences to be gained that you can leverage into a variety of different career paths, whether you're a graduate student or a postdoc or beyond. But you need to, as Susie and Audra both pointed out, you need to be strategic about what opportunities you take and think about, are those going to help you get where you want to be. Next question is are there any specific order to describing each section in the resume? I think the question means, is there a specific order you recommend in the sections of the resume, or is it more what Alan said earlier, that everything just be consistent and specific?
I mean, it should be somewhat tailored to the job you're applying for. So if you're applying for a teaching position, then your teaching experience should be up high on your CV. If you're applying for an academic position, a research-focused academic position, you might want to have research before teaching. Definitely, if you have awards or fellowships, try to stick that up towards the top, maybe right after education. So you want to kind of emphasize the most critical portions of the CV for that particular job closer to the beginning.
The next question is from Samantha, and she asks, how important is volunteering for
Okay, I guess I'll take this one. So it's not required, but if you go back to my slides where it said serial innovator traits, this concept of inclusive leadership, having empathy for people and being people focused, it's one of those things that you can put on a CV or resume that will allow the interviewer to probe a little bit deeper into that area and kind of how you think and how you work. And so I definitely think that it does show a little bit of that you're well-grounded type of person. So I think it's always a positive, but it's not required.
Thanks, Alan. The next question is, I've heard in the industry positions publications are not the priority. Is that true? Alan, I think you sort of addressed this, but I'll
Yeah, I mean, again, it was the top thing. It's one of the things we definitely look for. I mean, a publication, just think about what that is. That is the ultimate outcome or culmination of your doctorate work. And if people, that are candidates don't have publications, then it really kind of makes us question, is this person capable of delivering? And so you start playing those games with that type of thing. So are they required? Absolutely. So yeah.
Thanks. Kristen asks, how do the speakers view summaries of projects for CVs? I've had some advice to include 2 to 3 lines summarizing the impact of a body of work, and others have said just to include a list of publications and abstracts.
So I'll take this one. This is Susie. I would say that if you feel in any way kind of restricted by the length of your resume, remember there are lots of other applications like a LinkedIn profile where you can expand on that to allow you to describe the outcome of the publication.
Thanks, Susie. Nathan asks, should we put the full citation of each publication on the CV when applying for jobs in industry? I have heard to not do this. Any thoughts on that one?
I mean, I've seen it a bunch of different ways.
This
go ahead.
is Trish. I'll take. I think one thing that's nice to do is always bold your name, right, in the citation so that folks know where you are. If you have a list of 20 or so authors, you don't have to put all the first names in there. You could do et al. If it was you as the first author, et al., and you might say, plus 30 other authors. But I think if there's only a handful of people on it, you might want to do that. The other thing is that the person looking at your resume, if they take the time to actually read all the names in there, maybe because they're interested really specifically in that kind of science, they might recognize a name that you put in there. Now, one thing I think is really important, this may seem odd, but I've seen this mistake a couple times. Oftentimes there are shared first author papers, okay? So if it's Susie and Audra are shared first authors, but in the actual publication, Susie's name is first. When Audra writes her resume, she better put Susie's name first, even though they're shared first authors. I just wanted to call that out because I've seen people do that a couple times where they'll swap them because they are first authors, but it's shared first and that's the way it was written, right? So it was written, whatever, alphabetically or who knows how it was decided. And that's the sort of thing that when there are mistakes like that or something that looks intentional, I think that can hurt you. If someone takes the time to notice and really look close and find something like that, that could really hurt you. So you want to be incredibly accurate. You don't want to edit those sort of things to make yourself look better. And, you know, you can decide whether or not you need to use people's last names in there or not. Again, with 100 authors, I probably wouldn't do it, but with a handful, I probably would.
Thanks, Trish. So the next question is about applying for a job when you have most of the skills required, but not all of them. And I think the question is probably, first of all, can you apply for a job when you don't meet all of the things that they want? And then how is the best way to write your application materials for positions of that type?
So I'll take a stab at this one. I would say that the body of research says that men are more likely to apply for positions they're 80% qualified for than women are. I would say get the confidence to apply and then make sure your CV or resume reflects in order the importance that the job application solicited. And if you don't have certain things, you could, in the meantime, inform yourself, take a short course, and let them know that this is in progress, that you're trying to learn about it, or that you can say, I'm a quick learner. That's a lot of hand-waving sometimes, but I think it's very important to have the solicitation keywords at the top of your resume or CV.
Certainly, and I'll also add, I wouldn't not apply just because you don't have all of the skills that were requested. You could still be the best person for the job. But if there are only 3 required skills that job's looking for and you have 1, you probably are not in an advantageous position for getting that job.
Thanks, everyone. Our next question is from Johnny, who's a PhD student. He asks, if he wants to find a job in industry, should he do a postdoc? Is there an advantage or disadvantage to doing a postdoc if he is seeking a job in industry?
The answer to this question is that it depends. It depends really what your field of study is and what your doctorate research is focused on, the connections in your department, things like that. My personal experience has been I did not do a postdoc and I went straight into industry. But my background is pharmaceutical chemistry, and I was in a very industry-heavy department at the University of Kansas, and so it made it easier for me to make that transition. But if you do not have that type of, like for example, life sciences, probably it's best to try to do a postdoc and focus it in the skill sets or areas of research that would then apply to what's going on in industry at the time. You know, if you're a chemical engineer or something like that, you might not need it. So I guess it just depends. So really just kind of understand what it is that you're researching and what it is where you want to be, and will a postdoc help you get there in the future?
Thanks, Alan. The next question is there a hiring freeze for international students in industry right now?
The answer is no. It's going to vary company by company, obviously, as well as the total climate of where we live. You know, in the United States right now, H-1B1 visas has been a hot button item. But for the most part, I'm not aware of any blanket freeze. Like I said, it's going to vary company by company. Certainly at P&G, we look at all applicants because we are a global company, and a lot of companies are.
Austin asks, for industry research positions, is it still relevant to list teaching experiences in various memberships, or should people focus their CV more on publications, presentations, and technical skills, given the brief amount of time hiring managers spend looking at
it's for industry. So should you highlight teaching experience? Absolutely. This is something that shows good communication skills, especially if you're very successful at it. But one of the main things for PhDs to come into a company in an industry position is to have a very high level of technical mastery. They are the new best innovators in the company, and that's what they're expected to come in and do, right? Not to teach, but to be technical masters in their field. So it is very important to highlight the technical mastery aspect, but sure, definitely put in the teaching things too, because once the interviewer starts to go through your CV and look and see, oh, tell me about that time that you were teaching, what types of outcomes. Okay, how difficult is it to get a postdoc?
How
It's
easy or
not
difficult
that
is it to
difficult.
get in
Yeah,
industry
it's
postdoc
the same thing as almost getting a
experience,
job.
and is it
Whenever you're a
different or the
postdoc in a
same
company, you're
as being a
considered an
research
employee.
scientist in industry?
But typically the responsibilities are a little bit different. The postdoc is typically geared a lot more towards solving a technical challenge on a project
In
or
industry.
against a certain initiative or something like that. So it is very competitive. But you are an employee of the company. You're not a research scientist because they have other obligations and responsibilities as a part of their job, but you are seen as an equal.
Just a second. The next question is, if your publication list is very long, how should you list them on a resume? I do think we covered this question earlier. Obviously on a CV you can list them all. On a resume where you have limited space, I would suggest that you list the ones that you think are most pertinent to the job you're applying for, but if any of our other panelists have a different opinion, let me know.
Yeah, I agree. Keep it limited to the most relevant publications, and if you want, you can also include a link to the PubMed search for your name. So if they're interested in seeing the full list of publications, they can click there.
Yes, I still do that. So I'll say full list of publications and give write out the hyperlink, because when you send in an application, the hyperlink doesn't always work. So make sure you write out the full web address.
And you might consider listing the number. If you have 5 or 25, it might make a difference.
Next question is from Christine, who asks,
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, I can,
jobs outside
yeah,
of
certainly.
Is there a concern that they might be overqualified for certain positions? How can the applicant work around this?
I would say that most companies and most requisitions are going to be very specific on the types of and the level of experience that is required. So obviously you can definitely overqualify yourself for some jobs. Yes. If it's a PhD level higher and they say we need 2 to 4 years of experience and you have 5 to 6, I would still go ahead and apply to that and just say, look, I've already had this learning curve and I've been successful at it. So it just depends. They'll be very, very prescriptive about what they need. But it doesn't hurt to apply. Again, just kind of have to fit yourself into that role, and you don't want to devalue your education or experiences either. So if it's something you really, really want, just look at the requisition. If they're interested, they will call you, and then you can explain a little bit more about yourself. Again, it's to get the interview, not to get the job.
Thanks, Alan. Susan asks if the participants may reach out to the speakers on LinkedIn and connect with you via LinkedIn.
So for me, I do not link with people. I do not meet personally. So I would recommend, if you would like to connect with the Cornell Best program, there's a Cornell_Best LinkedIn group that I welcome you all to join and participate in.
I'm going to underscore that. Thanks, Susie. I don't think it's a good idea, frankly, to connect on LinkedIn with people that you don't know and don't really know you. So I routinely don't accept a lot of those requests. So yeah, that's a good advice. You make sure you know the person, that they're meaningful links, not just random.
I would also add that this may be a great opportunity to request an informational interview, whether it's from the people, our presenters, but more strongly I'd urge you to find people that are directly relevant to the position that you would like to eventually get or the field you would like to get. Those contacts, I think you'll have a more personal connection to them. All right, so we're coming up on 2 o'clock. We still have a number of questions left in the queue. I did want to go ahead and say a few things for those of you who need to leave at 2 o'clock. And then for the presenters who can stay on, maybe perhaps an extra 5 or 10 minutes, you're welcome to do so, and we'll answer the last few questions here. If the presenters also need to leave at 2 o'clock, I completely understand, and we very much appreciate the time you've already given, but we'll stay on an extra 5 or 10 minutes for those who can stay on. So a few announcements. As I mentioned before, the ASBMB has a number of career resources at www.asbmb.org, but we also do a quarterly career newsletter. It only goes out 4 times a year. We won't add you to other lists, but if you're interested in that career newsletter, you can email me at education@asbmb.org, and we will add you to that list. In addition, when I close out the window here, it will take you to our post-webinar survey. It will take you less than 5 minutes to complete, but as Trish mentioned earlier, we really do read those responses and we use them to improve future webinars. In addition, as you can see on the screen there, if you are not an ASBMB member but you thought this webinar was great and you'd like to join us, completing the survey will give you a membership discount for $10 off new graduate student membership or $20 off new postdoc membership. And we do have a joint postdoc membership with the National Postdoc Association as well. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Audra, Susie, Alan, and Trish for joining us today. I sincerely appreciate you giving an hour, actually more than an hour of your time, since you also did all of the prep work and the practice webinar session for this. So we, both I and the ASBMB and I really appreciate the time you've given to this. And I'd also like to thank all of our participants who joined today. We appreciate you joining this webinar. So for those who need to get off, it is just right at 2 o'clock. For those who can stay on an extra 5 or 10 minutes, I'll keep reading off the questions that are in the Q&A box right now. But we'll stick to the questions
since
that are
that
in the box
was
right
my
now and not take
timing deadline, I'll take that one. It's basically, is it clear? Is it precise?
The next question is from Angela.
You know, it says a lot about your communication skills just right off the bat. So if it looks clean, then you can move on to the more substantive things like publications, their area of research, their skill set. You know, have they had demonstrated outcomes? You know, have they led things, awards, recognitions, all that stuff, right? There's like that slide that I had that had those listed down were mostly in order of priority as I'm reading through a CV. So that's it.
Thanks, Alan. Another question, is it okay to have a resume of 5 pages? And I'll answer this one real quick. So if the application says submit a resume, it may say submit a resume, it may say submit a CV, or it may say submit a resume or CV. Follow the instructions for what the application says. If it says submit a resume and you are a grad student or a postdoc, 5 pages is too long. And this is actually, I will say, is one of my pet peeves when I get applications for entry-level positions and they're 6 pages long. I would recommend against doing that. Other people on the phone may have different opinions, though.
Oh, sure.
I have to. I do not. Those applications. I don't throw them in the trash because we don't get 300 applications, so I can take the time and look through them. We usually get more on the lines of 10 to 15, but I don't. It doesn't get quite the glance that a properly formatted resume would get. If you have a PhD, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The other thing I was going to add, this is Trish, that sometimes we'll get an application. I'm just going to make this up. Say we're advertising for somebody with experience in biochemistry, and the people will come in with experience in epidemiology and nothing in biochemistry. Those are the kinds of things that do sort of annoy you as someone who has to go through a pile of a few hundred. So I would call out, I would use the words they use in the ad, call out exactly what the experience is that they're asking for, and make sure that's upfront and obvious.
Thanks, Trish. If you have a PhD but you want to apply for positions that require a master's degree, how do you design your resume?
I would caution against underselling yourself. You might want to have a position that's suited for a PhD.
Great. I think this is a good question. Taylor asks, what are big mistakes people can make on a resume, or common mistakes? So I think one of them is obviously making it too long for the amount of experience that you have.
And not following the instructions. If there's something that, that the employer wants to see, put it in there and spell everything correctly.
Grammar, yes, grammar. Yeah. Don't use extra apostrophes. Don't make possessives when they're plurals, you know, things like that. When someone who knows how to read and write well looks at that, they automatically say, this person wouldn't be good at writing.
Yes. I'd also add to that fluff. So there, I see resumes where I could literally go in with a red pen and take out half the words, and it would say exactly the same thing.
Another thing, a note for international students, it's perfectly legitimate to have a native English speaker to read over your documents to make sure there are no spelling and language errors.
Similar to the cover letter question,
good advice.
that we get asked a lot. I would say that it doesn't necessarily get you much.
Do we recommend adding a summary or short bio at the beginning?
So it's a lot more risk than reward. I think you can take all that information and highlight more things in your CV. For example, outcomes related to your research, outcomes related to any philanthropy or any types of volunteering or leadership or anything like that. Those words eat up space, and they can be used against you if it's not on point. No.
Thanks, Alan. If we applied for awards but didn't get them, should we still put it on the CV for industry?
No.
Yeah, very rarely. If you got an honorable mention for something extremely competitive, like an NSF fellowship, potentially, but otherwise, no.
Yeah.
Depends on what the position is.
Someone transitioning
to be honest with you,
to industry
there are some cases where we need more folks worked on a very technical problem in the lab. You know, have experience leading a research group, right? And we've had instances where we've had people from Johns Hopkins come over to P&G, and they're some of the best innovators, but it was the position that was, you know, for them. Again, you know, with other people in industry, it could be more of technical project managers and things like that. It just depends on what that experience looks like and what the job description is asking for. Yes. Yes, if they ask for a resume, give them a resume. But if they say resume CV, I would give them your CV.
Or a resume. And I'll add something onto that question. Does it depend on what the application requests? Thanks. I think this question is in follow-up to what Trish mentioned earlier. So if you are a co-first author, how can you indicate that if your name comes second?
That's simple. You just use the asterisk after the two names, and after the citation, cell, volume, whatever, pages, whatever, you say asterisk denotes co-first authorship. Very simple.
Thanks, Trish.
Just
This is
don't
our last
change order.
This is our last question of the webinar. Is it a good idea to write about your dissertation on your CV?
Again, if it's relevant to the position you're applying to, then absolutely. If it has nothing to do with that, then ferret out those transferable
No,
skills that
thanks everyone for all your great questions.
All right, as I said, that was our last question, so I just wanted to give our speakers, if you have anything else you'd like to add to the webinar today, feel free to do so now. Any last comments?
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
As a follow-up, I would welcome anybody to look at our website at www.best.cornell.edu and to look at the NIH Consortium website, which is nihbest.org.
There are some great career resources on both of those sites. I can attest to that. All right, thank you again to Alan, Susie, Audra, and Trish for joining